boy. This is gonna be a rough one. You know, it's rare that you get that film series that continues to get better with each installment. I mean, sure, there are exceptions to the rule, with some franchises improving over time, or you do get a sequel that tops the original, but most of the time you start to see diminishing returns. And even good film series can start to decline. Now that doesn't mean that all these movies are bad. It just means that their major flaws start to greatly outweigh the positive aspects. And unfortunately, tonight's movie, Beyond Reanimator, is one of those films. And so, let's dive into the third and so far final film in the Reanimator franchise for the end of our Reanimator week. Are you ready, Frank? Alright, let's do this. I'm Ryan Reed, and this is Fright Films. Beyond Reanimator is a 2003 film, once again directed by Brian Usna and starring Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West, but other than that, most of the cast and crew is largely comprised of new players. The film was an independent production, with filming taking place in Spain, and it was made 13 years after Bride of Reanimator. But Beyond Reanimator does take this into account, explaining that Herbert West has been in prison for 13 years, and that the prison has a new doctor named Dr. Howard Phillips. Get it? Because it's based on the work of Howard Phillips Lovecraft? Anyway, he's come to work at the prison because he's obsessed with Herbert West's work, and of course, things go wrong, and people are reanimated, and etc., etc. We all know the drill at this point. And you know what? I'd be okay with that if the film was running with the central idea to create a fun movie. I mean, look at how many times that the plot of the Friday the 13th films was Jason kills teens, and yet we still are able to get some enjoyable moments even out of the worst of those films. Albeit very few enjoyable moments in some cases. I'm looking at you, Jason X. For shame. Anyway, Beyond Reanimator just feels cheap. And I know I said that about Bride of Reanimator, but at least that film felt cheap while executing successful ideas. This movie just feels like everyone is going through the motions. I mean, a good example is the lighting and cinematography, which are both bland. I mean, I don't understand why every single early 2000s low-budget movie had that same awful digital TV look. Like, it's somehow both overly polished and flat and lifeless at the same time. I don't get it, because all it would take would be some simple lighting gels or some interesting camera angles, and instead what we get is harsh three-point lighting and some really boring static medium and wide shots. Well, maybe the script makes up for it. And no. Just no. I mean, other than a few great lines from Combs, the rest of the script just doesn't work. It should be interesting to see Herbert West in prison. And it's not. The movie does nothing with it. And then the subplot about the doctor and his love interest is just a retelling of the first movie, but with far less interesting characters. I mean, everyone is so forgettable. Here's a good example of that. When I was taking notes on this movie, I thought that the doctor's name was Alan until 2/3 into the movie. He's named after the author of the source material, and yet he's so devastatingly dull that somehow I misheard his name as Alan. Now, there are some good things in Beyond Reanimator. I think it goes without saying that once again, Jeffrey Combs is amazing in his portrayal of Herbert West. And after an almost pointless pre-title opening, Don't worry, they try to fit it into the movie, but ultimately it amounts to very little and could have been cut without losing much of, if not any, character motivation. Anyway, at the very end of this, we get to see Herbert West in his trademark white button-down shirt, black tie, and large lens glasses. It's like seeing an old friend at a gathering you don't want to be at with a bunch of new people, and you see him and you're like, oh my gosh, I know that guy! Well, anyway, after this, what does the movie do with Herbert West? Why, they put him in a blue prison outfit for most of the runtime and change his glasses to a modern design. Why? Why would you do this? And maybe it sounds like I'm being a bit too nitpicky. I mean, after all, it is the same character, right? Yes, but it would be like watching an Indiana Jones movie, and for the opening sequence, he's got his trademark fedora and jacket on and his whip, and he's ready to go. But then for the rest of the movie, he's wearing a purple and green tracksuit for some reason. Like, it literally makes no sense, and it goes against who the character is. Now, Beyond Reanimator does give us a third act where Combs gets to don the traditional Herbert West outfit, but at that point it's almost too little too late because we spend so much time bouncing around to other characters that it is pointless. The only other enjoyable part of the movie is the actor who plays the Warden, Simone Andreu. He is so wickedly evil and over the top here that he doesn't just chew the scenery, he eats it. It's so much fun to watch. But then the movie does something so incredibly stupid with his character in the third act that he becomes lame, just like everyone else. It's like everything that was great about the first two Reanimator films is gone here. The over-the-top gore, gone, replaced with lazy special effects. The tongue-in-cheek humor, gone, replaced with lazy jokes. The creative cinematography, the moody lighting, the interesting characters, gone, gone, gone. I mean, even when this film tries to push the envelope, it comes off as lazy. Remember when I described the first film as having a well-done, sleazy, and cheesy feeling? Well, this film tries to kind of replicate that, but when it does that, it just comes off as unnecessary, boring, or unnecessarily boring. I honestly don't like ripping movies apart because nobody sets out to make a bad movie. I mean, even the worst movies that you've seen were made by people who were trying to make a good film, or at least a profitable film. But here, it's just such a step down from the first two movies that it's hard not to focus on the bad aspects instead of the good ones. Plus, the budget for this movie was $3 million. Now, I know that since the first movie was made in 1985, there's been inflation, but the budget of that movie was $900,000. So let's factor in that inflation. That means that in 2003, when Beyond Reanimator was made, the budget of the first film would be a little under $1.6 million. So you're telling me that for almost double the budget, you couldn't make a movie that was on the same wavelength or even in the same ballpark? It's just so frustrating because I can see what could have been. And instead, what we get is a forgettable third installment in a cult classic franchise. And that just makes me sad. Well, I don't want to end Reanimator Week on a down note. So here's a positive thought. It's amazing that we got 3 films in this franchise at all. I mean, it all started with an artistic director of theater who wanted to start making movies. Just that one thought was enough to start moving in the right direction, and through time and effort and a group of people working toward one vision, we got a cool cult classic film franchise out of it. And it'll continue to gross out and entertain and, yes, even inspire people for years and years and years to come. I'm Ryan Reed. Go watch a movie.